Hello everyone. I have a special guest with me today to join me on the Books and More with Jewish Ladies on YouTube. Yes, I would like to welcome Michelle Cameron. Hello, Michelle.
Hello, Cynthia.
Thank you for coming on our show.
My pleasure.
I want to tell you a little about her. Michelle Cameron is the author of Napoleon's Mirage. That is that book. And it's the sequel to Beyond the Ghetto Gates. Two fantastic books, which are great. You got to read them. I recommend them. Now, today we are going to discuss Napoleon's Mirage. But first, I want Michelle to tell us a little bit about herself. Tell the audience, who are you, Michelle Cameron?
Okay. Well, I am the author of Jewish historical fiction, and I primarily like to write about Jewish periods of time and events in our history that very, very few people, including few Jews, know anything at all about. And so I've written books from all the way back in the Babylonian exile through the Middle Ages to these two books, Beyond the Ghetto Gates and Napoleon's Mirage, which deal with Napoleon and the Jews. And I'm also a director of the Writers' Circle. I teach students we teach students from grade 3, but I primarily teach teens, tweens, and our aspiring novelists.
Wow, this is very good. Now tell me, did you always intend to write a sequel to Beyond the Ghetto Gates?
In fact, my original intention was to write a trilogy. And I actually started by writing a book about the Jews during the Revolutionary War, which takes place about 9 years before Beyond the Ghetto Gates. The politics of the French Revolution are incredibly complicated. And when you get to the Jewish part of it, it's also extremely complicated. And so I found I was contending with the politics and not really getting to the story. I finished the entire manuscript. I was actually considering submitting it. I'm glad I didn't. I don't think it was a good book. But then I already knew the characters when it came to Beyond the Ghetto Gates and then for Napoleon's Mirage. So in that way, it was a really nice thing to be able to write the second and the third book in my proposed trilogy. I may someday go back to that first book and write it as a prequel. I'm not sure.
Now tell me, is it different, a sequel, is it different from writing a sequel as compared to a standalone book? What's the difference?
So the difference is you have to know in a sequel that you have two sets of readers. And the first reader is the reader who has read your previous book, who knows what happened there, often who is very excited to read the continuation of the story. The second reader, however, is the person who's never read that previous book and who has to be brought up to speed on what happened, those things that happened that sort of take, that are important to know in the second book. And so writing a sequel, particularly in the opening chapters, can be, it's got to be a balancing act. How much do you include that the new reader doesn't know, and how much do you leave out so the returning reader isn't totally bored?
Now you've called this an anti-war book. Can you explain that?
So Napoleon's Mirage takes place during Napoleon's Egyptian expedition. And he brought a major fleet over with him. He brought close to 200 savants, which were artists and archaeologists and scientists and mathematicians together with him. But he had no compunction about going to war against primarily the Mamluk warriors, who were really the de facto rulers of Egypt at this time. I call it an anti-war war novel because I do depict a lot of the war scenes, you know, the Battle of the Pyramids, the Battle of the Nile, which was the Navy, Napoleon coming into Israel when he learns that the Turkish Sultan has sent people to try and get rid of him. So I do depict all of these, but my main character, Daniel, who truly admired Napoleon in the first book, ends up seeing the realities of war and how brutal it can be. And so he ends up, his faith in Napoleon slowly erodes, and his faith in what warfare can bring absolutely diminishes during the course of the novel. And that's why I call it an anti-war novel.
Now, could you tell us about the characters in the book and maybe a brief synopsis of the book?
Okay, so let's start with a brief synopsis. We have two characters who we met in Beyond the Ghetto Gates. Daniel, who I just mentioned, as well as Christoph. Daniel is Jewish, Christoph is a lapsed Catholic. And then we have, so they are both lieutenants in Napoleon's troops, and they follow him. They don't even know where they're heading at the beginning. As Daniel would say, this was the best kept secret in any army ever, that all of these people were just willing to follow Napoleon no matter where he was going to lead them. So as I said, they end up in Egypt. There are battle scenes. The troops have to get used to life in Egypt. It's not easy for them. A lot of the men have actually smuggled aboard their wives or their girlfriends. So there's definitely some of that as well. Indeed. And then I also am writing from a Egyptian Muslim point of view. And this was because I found a wonderful book, the story of the French occupation of Egypt, written by a Egyptian Muslim. And it was great because I got to represent all sides. That's that part of the book.
I see.
The other part of the book is we're back in Ancona, Italy, which we got to know very well in Beyond the Ghetto Gates. And there is, the heroine of that book, her name was Mirage de Ancona, and she, as she would tell you, she slept with Christoph when they were there one time. And so that was, for her, not that big a deal, but the Jewish community there learns about it, and they consider her a ruined woman. And she's struggling to keep her family ketubah, Jewish marriage certificate, workshop going, and she runs into all sorts of problems, and she's actually longing for Daniel at this point. And then a British blockade of the French army makes it impossible to get letters back and forth. And so this long distance romance sort of grinds to a halt with both parties, both Daniel and Morel, thinking that the other does not care for them. And that's kind of where we are. So in that, I think I told you a little bit about the characters as well. So there are a few new characters, including Ethan, who was one of the main characters in that first book that never got published. And he is a skilled linguist. He speaks all sorts of languages, and he serves as a translator for this book.
Now, we were talking about long-distance relationships back then. How does it differ from today's long-distance relationships?
Oh, it's completely different. You know, there's no texting, there's no email, there's no chat. None of that exists. All of that immediate things. My husband right now actually has just come back. He went to a wedding in Israel, and we spoke every morning in one way or another. Of course, there are no phones either. So really, long-distance relationships had to exist through the medium of letters. And the problem with letters, especially at this time, is they could get waylaid, they could not be delivered, and they took basically 3 months to go from France or Italy to Egypt at this point in time. That's a long time to go, not knowing what your lover is doing.
Yes, I remember my family. My mom was from Antwerp, Belgium, and we used to write air letters. And
Yes.
we would anticipate, oh my God, when is the letter coming back? We want to get a reply. We used to have pen pals. Such a different planet.
It totally
really
is.
was.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I loved it though. I really liked it. It was simple life, you know? My question to you is, what inspired you to write these books? What inspired you to become a writer?
So I definitely started to want to become a writer when I was in 4th grade. And I, always thought that was what I was going to be. But of course, life gets in the way. So I had children, I had a job, I had, all of those things that get in the way. And it wasn't until I was, my kids were in high school when I finally felt like I had the time to sit down and write my first historical novel, The Fruit of Her Hands. I used to get up at 4:30 in the morning to write.
Wow.
I don't have to do that anymore. My kids are grown and flown.
Yes.
So why did I want to write these books? Well, it's an interesting thing that I once was talking about Beyond the Ghetto Gates with a old classmate of mine who is now a rabbi in a Chicago synagogue. And he pulled out this old, what do you call those? Yearbook. He pulled out this yearbook and he turned to my category and he said, look, it says, what do you want to be when you grew up? She wants to be a historical novelist.
Wow.
History has always fascinated me. And it's one of the things I love about writing these books is that you get to do so much research. You have to do so much research.
And you do.
I do.
Yes.
And in fact, I have to limit my research because it's just such a wonderful rabbit hole that you could just stay there forever learning more and more and more. So I basically limit myself to about 3 months of pure research before I start writing. That doesn't mean I'm not researching every day. There's always something you don't know, but it's in service to the writing, not just to the pure research.
Her books are very well researched. There's so much in each and every book. My God, you'll see. You have to read them. I recommend them. You will see. So what do you want to say to us in closing, and where can we buy your books?
So my books are available anywhere that you can purchase books. If you prefer local bookstores, which I certainly do, you can go in and tell them this book is available through Simon & Schuster, who is the distributor, and they will be able to order them for you. Obviously, it's on every single digital outlet, as well as, both the paperback version as well as the digital version. So you can really order them pretty much anywhere.
Where can we reach you?
So my website is probably the best starting point. I am at www.michelle-cameron.com. On there are my Facebook, my Instagram, I just got onto Threads. I haven't quite figured that one out yet. My Substack. You can find all of those on there, and I'm always delighted to have my readers get in touch with me, so please don't hesitate.
Okay, great. I want to thank you for coming on our show. It was a pure delight, and get her books, please. I recommend them, especially if you're interested in history, a plus, and even if you're not, you'll learn something. It's fantastic. So thank you. This is Sylvia from Books and More Jewish Ladies on YouTube, on Facebook. We're also on Instagram, Books and More 1818, and we're on Spotify, Books and More with Jewish Ladies on Spotify, and we're growing and growing. So thank you, everyone, and goodbye now, and we hope to see you soon. And if you like this video, comment, and if you like her book, comment and buy her book.
Okay.
Thank
you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.